Hello, thank you all for joining us. This is the Community Energy Leadership Coalition speaker series. And today we have my esteemed colleague, Noah Oakes, who is going to go straight into having a great conversation. And we also will have some time to have a conversation about the legislature. Noah, without do you have some housekeeping? I may interject every once in a while, but I'm going to let Noah lead this one. And thanks again for being here.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Sean. She said, I'm Noah Oakes. I'm the Senior Policy Manager for SPEER. I've been working here for almost 4 years, it'll be 4 years in November, so looking forward to that anniversary. I've also worked with the Texas Department of Transportation as well as the Nature Conservancy in previous roles, working on policy issues, legislative issues here in Texas primarily. This is my second full session through the Texas Legislature with SPEER, so always new information and fun things to talk about, and additional craziness always seems to ensue. So, the little bit of housekeeping we have here, let me start if I can get my clicker going. There we go. So, who exactly is SPEER? We are the South Central Partnership for Energy Efficiency as a Resource. We are one of the 6 regional energy efficiency organizations in the country. And as you can see on the graphic there, we operate in both Texas and Oklahoma. We're a member-based nonprofit 501(c)(3) organization. That specification actually becomes a little bit important when we get into some of our efforts at the legislature, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. We have over 65 members currently with a wide cross-section of energy efficiency industries, and we can talk about some of the other folks in there as well. We have a focus on outreach, education, and a collaboration on clean energy. Our mission is to accelerate the adoption of advanced building systems and energy efficient products, policies, and services throughout the South Central United States. We do this through our work in both the policy program, building codes program, and Sean's local government program as well. And we also have our high performance buildings or BOC courses that we provide throughout the year. Our membership includes advocacy organizations, local governments in cities and counties, energy service companies, manufacturers, trade associations, and utilities.
A few other housekeeping items is the YouTube video will be posted by next Tuesday, and I will have the link in the chat. You'll also receive a survey. I'll put that in the chat as well. But if you are hoping to get some CEUs from attending, then also make sure that to respond to the survey to receive the CEUs. And I think that that actually is it. Yeah, so this is being recorded. We'll provide the link and a follow-up email, or you can go straight to our YouTube channel, which I will provide that information. All right. Thanks so much, Noah.
Perfect. Thank you. So for today's webinar, I'm going to set the stage here with the agenda. We will have an initial discussion over the history of the PUC energy efficiency rules, as well as the statutes and the kind of where those started and where they're at today. We'll talk about the energy efficiency utility program's performance as we see over the last several years. Then we'll switch gears a little bit and talk about the legislative session that just passed. We'll talk primarily about the regular session, although we will kind of hint at some of the special sessions that have happened since Sine Die started in June. We'll wrap up my part of the discussion with what's next, what we're kind of looking at the interim and into next session, which will be in 2027. And then I'm opening it up for a Q&A and discussion. I'm really open that you guys would have some things you'd like to talk about. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can and follow up where needed on some specific legislation, as well as if there are priorities or options that you guys want to talk about that you think is important moving forward. So, as I said, to set the stage, the history of the Public Utility Commission's energy efficiency rules, as well as the legislative background behind that. So, starting way back in 1999, SB 7 established not just Texas's first, but the nation's first energy efficiency resource standard. What that basically is a policy that requires our utilities to meet a certain criteria or goal to reduce their annual growth and demand for their programs. They do this through various energy efficiency programs like insulation, window replacement, weatherization, looking at appliance replacements, things like that. It took a few years for these programs to set up, but as you see in 2005, SB 712 codified it and continued that process and added kind of the additional offer programs, so your standard offer programs, your market transformation programs, and things like that. The programs were incredibly popular actually in just that first couple of years of existence that in 2007, HB 3693 increased the goal from 10% of growth demand to 20%. So doubled it because of the excitement and how well these programs are received. Just a few years later, in 2010, the first and only time the Public Utility Commission actually, of their own volition, without legislative mandate, increased the goals from 20% of demand growth to 30%. So this is the first time we've seen the PUC in this particular section of the rules make a decision to move and increase goals without legislative direction. However, in the following legislative session in 2011, we see SB 1125, which codified that 30% demand growth goal and also added a trigger mechanism, which I'll discuss in a moment. Another interesting piece of SB 1125 is that it also incorporated load management programs into the energy efficiency goals. So allows utilities to provide load management and help incorporate that into their process to get and achieve their goals for load demand reductions. However, what's kind of interesting here is once we get about halfway into this graphic, you see not a lot really has happened substantively to the rules or the goals. So in 2019, the PUC had some administrative changes. They weren't super substantive to the rules. Then we also see, and I'm sure many of you recall, both the winters in 2011, also in 2022 of Winter Storm Uri and Winter Storm Elliott, and also the summers that we've had in between up to today, where we've had record-breaking summer peak demand over and over again for really the last last 5 or so years, which brings us to 2025 today. There is some interesting information and some things to talk about moving forward for 2025, but that's going to be a little kind of teaser for you guys to stick around a little bit longer. So I apologize in advance. This is like the hardest thing to make really digestible and easy to see and kind of have cool graphics. So I'm just going to kind of run through what exactly is our current energy efficiency rule. They're housed under Chapter 25.181 and 182 of the Texas Administrative Code and the PUC. They establish a cost-effectiveness standard at a program level for all the programs, and they establish the annual goal, which we mentioned was that 30% reduction of annual growth in demand for residential and commercial customers only. Industrial customers do have an opt-out clause, which most of them do take because for a number of reasons, but generally speaking, our goals are going to be focused only on residential and commercial customers. When that 30% of annual growth and demand is met, a trigger mechanism goes off that establishes a new goal of 0.4% for weather-adjusted peak demand for the previous year. That trigger mechanism goal is generally going to be established and hit by the larger utilities, so like Encore, CenterPoint, and I believe AEP, if I'm not mistaken, are all on the triggered 0.4% goal for their peak demand. The rule also establishes incentive payment processes and goes over administrative requirements as well for reporting, measurement, and verification, where some of these costs are allocated, where research and demand is allowed, and how kind of pilot programs and things like that work. It outlines the various standard offer and market transformation programs, and it also establishes a targeted low-income program of 10% of the program budget. So that's just of the budget, it's not of their actual expenditures. I didn't put on here, but just the last portion there is the performance bonus from Chapter 25, 182. It can be a little challenging to get all that in, but basically what this establishes is that the utilities, for performing well and outperforming their goals, for every 2% that they achieve above their actual stated goal, they get 1% in net benefits returned to them for a cap of 10% of net benefits for a performance bonus. This is intended to try and keep the utilities incentivized to continue working on these programs, but it's not intended necessarily to make them whole again if they put in $10 million, they're not anticipated to get $10 million back and make it a flush. It's supposed to still kind of be a little bit more tilted towards we have to do this because of the impacts to the grid and how it can help deliver a more reliable and resilient grid. So how are we doing as a program? Well, frankly, from statewide, the efficiency programs are really effective at what they're supposed to do. We know that demand side energy policies are incredibly cost effective, especially when you're looking at the alternative for the supply or generation side. Here in Texas, we know that it's a 3-to-1 generally cost benefit ratio. So for every dollar we spend on energy efficiency, we get about $3 back in return for net benefits. And as you can see here, the blue lines are going to be the expenditures that the utilities, as a collection, all 8 of them have spent. Although the far right ones on the green are all projected. And that orange line is actually going to be the achieved demand reductions that we have over time. And one thing I point out here is that after that 2011 bill that we talked about, SB 1125, was passed, we start seeing kind of a stagnation of the spending. So it's anywhere between 120 and 150-ish million dollars between all the utilities, kind of stagnant, a little bit flat. But again, we're seeing that orange line continue that upward trajectory moving forward. So again, it just kind of reinforces the fact that these programs are continuing to see, uh, reductions, and their performance is continuing to improve even without increased spending. And just to kind of continuing that discussion of where our performance is, these blue lines are going to be the actual goals that the utilities are intended to hit every year. And the orange line is going to be what they're actually achieving throughout the process. And so, again, as you can see, the utilities are doing a great job of meeting and exceeding their goals. But once we hit that 2011, 2012 timeline, we start seeing the goal or the achievements are doubled almost what their actual goal is. And what that signifies a lot is going to be that load management program being included really helps build up their achieved reductions for the utilities. Um, but ultimately, I think the one of the other big takeaways here is that the performance for energy efficiency in Texas, because they're doing so well, because we're seeing such returns, it really is a cost effective and saving Texans money every day. So heading into the legislative session, usually around November, prior to the start of session, SPEER works with our robust membership. We talk to our board, we talk internally with our colleagues, our different program managers, to identify potential legislative priorities for the next session. We came out with 7 this session, and I'll go into further detail on some bills that also kind of correlate with these priorities in a moment, but just high level. We have the Energy Efficiency Resource Standard Improved Performance. We have a section for updated building and energy codes, workforce development, demand response, residential incentives, and distributed energy resources, transmission build out, insurance, and then extreme weather preparedness. So taking kind of that, 30,000-foot view of the legislature this session, the 89th session began in January. For those who are maybe not aware, the Texas Legislature meets once every other year for 140 days. It's always going to be on your odd years. And this session, we had well over 10,000 bills filed, which is, I don't know if it was a record, but it certainly felt like an awful lot as I was going through most of it throughout the session. We tracked over 300 pieces of legislation specifically. This is not all going to be focused on, demand side energy policies. It's kind of a whole gamut of energy policies and potential legislation that could impact any one of our membership, as well as anyone who might be interested as an energy stakeholder. A new holiday for me is always going to be filing deadline, and it has been for the last several years, because as you can see, I probably can imagine with 10,000 bills, you just kind of open up your email and see that you've got hundreds of bills that were just filed the night before, and you have to go through all of them. So March 15th was the filing date deadline for the elected leaders to file their bills. And then at that point, we start seeing kind of a ramp up of bills moving through the process. Finally, come June 2nd, which is the final day of session, of regular session, everything kind of comes to a halt, ends, and then we go forward. This year, we had 2 special sessions that were called, starting in July 21st and August 15th. They have a number of items on them on their call sheet, including extreme weather preparedness. But as I'm sure many of you are aware, the first special session was kind of overtaken a lot by the mid-cycle redistricting efforts from the governor's office and the governor's direction. So that really kind of took a turn and really kind of put all the focus on that. Now that we've kind of seemingly moved forward with that process, we're starting to see some of this discussion on the other items like extreme weather preparedness. We had 2 kind of key energy takeaways from this past session that aren't necessarily demand focused, but it's just kind of the broad overarching themes. The first one is going to be the priority bill from the Senate, which was SB 6. As you'll see, there's 3 little asterisks there. Whenever there's 3, that means the bill did become law. And in this case, this bill sought to rein in transmission costs, improve load forecasting, and protect residential customers. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of a continuation of bills that were filed and passed last session, and to really try and rein in some of those issues following Winter Storm Uri. We also saw a significant focus on targeting renewable energy resources and limiting their growth. And this is something we actually, as a shameless plug, talked about with a policy expert up in Oklahoma, Kyla McNabb, that just came out on a What's Up video series that we had that came out on Tuesday, where she talked about in Oklahoma similar types of targeting bills towards renewable energy sources. So looking at setbacks for where you can and can't put new solar panels or wind energies and things like that, or batteries. These particular bills in SB 819, SB 388, and SB 715 all did not pass, but they all kind of came at renewable energy, and they were kind of like the big, quote unquote bads for renewable energy resources as the session progressed. As for SPEER's priorities, we did have a number of bills that we were tracking and got involved with where we could. I think the top bill that we were most involved with was SB 2994. And I see here there's a little bit of a snafu. It did not pass out of both chambers. It only passed out of one chamber and then out of the House committee. So it just did not get a vote at that point. But what this bill would have done was establish or improve, rather, the utility energy efficiency programs with incremental changes that would help with elevating the cost effectiveness criteria from the program level to the portfolio level. It would have very incrementally increased some of the goal language. It would have actually, in the last committee substitute, removed load management programs from the existing efficiency goals discussion. And as a result, would have adjusted accordingly for those goals for the utilities. And they also talked about a number of other changes, looking at low income and hard to reach definitions and potentially increasing those budgets a little bit. So, like I said, SB 2994 was a compromise bill. It was not perfect by any stretch. The utilities, advocacy organizations, manufacturers, and others tried to come together to try and find some language that would work. But unfortunately, it did not pass and ran out of time. We did, on the good side of things, get HB 5323, which establishes the Texas Energy Waste Advisory Committee. This bill has a lot of potential, we hope, for bringing together energy efficiency and other energy-related Texas agencies like the PUC, ERCOT, SECO, Texas Community Housing and Community Affairs Agency or Department, TCEQ, and others to start working together collaboratively to identify and recommend potential changes to the legislature to help reduce energy waste in the state. Really excited about the efforts that work there, and it did pass and will become statute in September after the waiting period. Shifting gears a little bit to updating building codes and energy codes, we did have good news here as well. SB 783, which was a refile from the previous session that just it ran out of time in the 88th, actually got passed and signed into law. It allows the State Energy Office, Conservation Office, to adopt new energy codes. Our energy codes are currently at the statewide level at 2025, and so this would allow them to increase them to the 2018, 2021s, 2024s, based on what they, after the usual stakeholder process and due diligence that they had to do. We did also see movement out of HB 871 on the building side, which got voted out of the House. It would have increased statewide building codes to the standards of 2018 levels. Currently, again, we're on the 2015 levels for that. So this would help with building resiliency and reliability for as we go through constructing new buildings and commercial offices. HB 4016 was kind of an interesting bill. I didn't really know exactly where to put that on this list, but it was a really important bill. I think a lot of stakeholders jumped onto this as just a really exciting opportunity for Texas. What it would have done would be to ban electric resistance heat as a primary heating source in new residential dwellings. And why that's important is that our existing peak load is primarily driven almost entirely by, or at least by a majority of residential and commercial heating and cooling needs. And the reason is because those electric resistance heaters are just highly inefficient as opposed to, for instance, newer heat pumps that are incredibly, 200% more efficient at times. And so by banning those for new construction, we could really start to slow down and curb that process of our load growing so exponentially, at least for heating and cooling needs. Obviously, it doesn't address the concerns of data centers and coming into the state, as well as the electrification of thermal fleets, but it's at least trying to address one issue. It did not move out of its committee, but it did receive a committee hearing, had a lot of support from across the industries. So we're hopeful that that'll get moving, and also it helps that other states with similar composed legislatures like Georgia and Florida have passed similar legislation in the past. Workforce development is going to continue to be an issue moving forward. We did have a couple of bills that did pass. SB 2925, which establishes the task force on modernizing manufacturing, as well as HB 3260, which established an industry recognized apprenticeship programs grant program. Both passed. These don't have direct implications on energy efficiency, but definitely things that we're hopeful that in ways energy efficient workforce can be, or energy efficiency and energy workforce in general can be kind of worked into over time. We did have HB 4443, which would have established, created a pilot program for careers in energy efficient technologies for just the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It did get passed out of the House, but it did not have time in the Senate to move. So, would have been a great opportunity, but unfortunately, it kind of stalled where it needed, or we couldn't afford for it to stall. We had a couple of bills on demand response, residential incentives, and DERs. They are both kind of continuations from previous legislative statutes and bills that were passed in 88, although they did not move out of their respective chambers. And then to round out our Texas priorities from SPEER, we had the transmission build out. There was a number of bills on transmission build out. We did highlight HB 3069 here. It did move out of the House, but did not move out of the Senate. It would have improved long-term planning criteria for transmission projects. And 3044 sought to eliminate generic constraints for transmission. Again, neither of those moved. And what we know is the transmission infrastructure and transmission build out is going to be a really big issue over the next 10, 15, 20 years, not just here in Texas, but across the country. It continues to be something that ISOs across the nation are considering and really trying to get a grip on. I did note here that there are several bills on vegetation management that were filed, like HB 1606, which did pass, and it requires notice for customers on how to request veg management for trimming. I was a little hesitant to put it in this section, mainly because that's really going to impact primarily your distribution grid, not necessarily your transmission grid. But I didn't really have a better place to put it. I did think that that was kind of an important potential bill for folks in this audience and others to be aware of. We had a couple bills on insurance, although none of the ones that we tracked really helped impact um, consumer costs, because as we all, I'm sure many people know, um, insurance premiums, especially homeowners insurance, is just continuing to skyrocket because of the extreme weather that we have and we keep experiencing throughout the state. There were several bills filed in that next section here, which would be extreme weather preparedness, like HB 13, which would have allowed for, or which would have created the Interoperability Council for Emergency Weather Communications, um, as well as SB 1312, which would have prohibited utilities from disconnecting service to anyone in a county subject to a disaster declaration. Again, it's not a direct apples to apples situation here, but there is potential that, if we could get a handle on some of that extreme weather preparedness, it might help bring down some insurance premiums to some degree. How much, frankly, I don't think anyone really knows, if at all. So, but we do ultimately know that we have to address some of this extreme weather issues. As a result, HB 13 was put on the call list for the special session currently ongoing now. Um, so there's some room for excitement there, I think, to get some handle on the emergency weather preparedness. We did have a number of other topics energy related that got discussed, and a couple that jumped out that were, really heavily discussed. Primarily was nuclear energy. HB 14 was a priority bill from the House. It did get passed into law, and it establishes the Advanced Nuclear Energy Office within the governor's office to help kind of promote and coordinate nuclear energy development in the state. We also had several bills on utility regulation. For instance, HB 5247, which establishes an alternative rate adjustment process for construction of new transmission under the Permian Basin plan. Again, a lot of these bills, as you'll note, are stemming from previous legislation moving from previous years. So what's next? There's a lot of what's next. Obviously, we've got the special session currently ongoing from August 15th until September 15th, basically. I think this is the final day. There's still going to be discussions about resiliency from flooding and other extreme weather, which was added to the agenda. Right now, as far as what I've been able to pay attention and see, a lot of the discussion is going to be on that communications and getting awareness built rather than actually looking at resiliency infrastructure and kind of green infrastructure type projects. It's really more about just getting that information out to customers so we can try and avoid what happened over the July 4th weekend or even prior back when we had the wildfires back in the early or late winter, early spring. We also have, after the special session, the interim begins, which is always an interesting time. That's where the committees will begin meeting. They'll begin discussing where their priority issues are. They'll be doing research. They'll be meeting with experts throughout the process to identify potential policy recommendations and changes that could be brought into the 90th session. SPEER, we do our best to try and make everyone aware of when these committee hearings are coming up and what they're being discussed. And so please make sure that you're paying attention to our social media where you can. We try to help get that information out. But there's a lot of great discussions that go on in those committee hearings during the interim, as well as the interim reports that are filed. However, I think another big piece that we kind of have to prepare for is the midterm elections in November of 2026. Election season is coming early and earlier every year, it seems like. And as a result, we are seeing, as a result of the redistricting efforts, we're already seeing a lot of elected officials around the state eyeing potential congressional runs, potential runs for statewide office or other districts. So the composition of the Texas legislature is likely going to change as far as just who's there, not necessarily, the political affiliation, but who is there, who's going to be making decisions moving forward, and then leading into the 90th legislative session, which begins in January 2027. And as I mentioned before, there's kind of an important opportunity here, kind of my little teaser to try and keep you around for 30 minutes. We have some new exciting news from the PUC. After the 88th legislative session, the appropriations bill allotted funding for the PUC to establish the Energy Efficiency Division. They did so, and we couldn't be happier as an organization. We've been able to speak with that division's director and their staff. They've been wonderful and really excited to hear their kind of discussions and what they're looking at and what they think is important moving forward to get energy efficiency programs kind of on track and where they need to be and if they can grow and where they can grow here in Texas. As a result, earlier this year, the PUC undertook, the Energy Efficiency Division undertook a stakeholder assessment process and talked to various stakeholders to see what areas can be improved upon within the rules. And we're seeing now that the PUC, just as of last week, opened up a rulemaking for the energy efficiency programs in docket 57743. Now, before I get too excited about it, they're looking at this kind of a piecemeal way. And this is what the energy efficiency director had told us at the public meeting back in February, I believe, or maybe March. I can't remember exactly the dates. But they're looking at hopefully opening up kind of separate parts of this rule. This portion in particular is going to be looking primarily at the performance bonus aspect. There are some things in there that we do support as an organization. I can say that. For instance, we support that there's an avoided cost calculation schedule, kind of a small administrative change, but it can really help provide flexibility for the utilities by moving it up in the calendar year. There's also some definitions which we are supportive of that are looking at low income and hard to reach populations and kind of how those can be added into and make a little more clarity for the utilities as they administer their low income programs. This is running through a public comment period by October 6th. So if anyone is interested in wanting to get more involved, please feel free to reach out and happy to help where I can and provide input. But we are anticipating, again, based on what was said publicly from the PUC, that there will be an additional rulemaking aspect at the beginning of 2026 to take a little bit more of a comprehensive and robust look at the energy efficiency rules. That's where we're hopeful that we'll have a good discussion on cost effectiveness criteria, where that should be, if it should be the program level or portfolio level. Should there be additional length to the schedule for the reporting schedules and how these programs operate, what the goal discussion is going to look like, how all these various pieces work together, and how we can really help and improve low income and hard to reach access for energy efficiency. So there's a lot going on, but I think that's a kind of a big overview of what we had going on here in Texas for the legislative session and beyond. I see a bunch, I'm sorry, I've been seeing a bunch of comments pop up and I'm not able to keep up with them. So, Sean, am I?
Uh, yeah, there were a couple. So we'll go back to some of your updates. There was a question regarding the health safety code 388.005, if there was an update to the requirement for uh, um, local government agencies within the non-attainment regions, whether or not they need, if they're updated with their plans, if that was passed.
I don't believe it was passed. Um, but I will need to double check on that one for sure. I'm off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure it wasn't. I should note, and probably should put the link in here too. We have a updated tracker that has all 300 plus bills that we're tracking, and that's been up
I
to
put
date.
it in the very beginning.
Okay, perfect. So it should be
Yeah,
in, if it did pass, it would
let's
be
see.
in there.
Yeah, we'll look. And then there was another question, got a couple in here. Any comment on gas and how the RRC reacts to the 89th session?
As far I, so there was a lot of discussion around natural gas. A lot of those bills that I mentioned earlier, like I'll go back to it. SB 819, it would have essentially made a goal for natural gas dispatchable generation and make a cap of how much renewable energy could be provided within our resource mixture. It did not pass, but again, that was a lot of discussion around natural gas, and the discussion is that it's the only real dispatchable generation that we have, not really incorporating battery storage into this, not really incorporating other aspects into the discussion. As far as the Railroad Commission, I have not heard much from them moving forward. Obviously, like I said, none of these bills passed. We are still a natural gas state. I think that's something that we recognize as an organization. And one of the things we are hopeful for, the Railroad Commission did just last session establish energy efficiency goals from natural gas perspective. It's been a little quiet on that front for a while, and so we're hopeful that that'll kind of take shape over the next couple years. But as of right now, we really haven't gotten a lot from them on that front.
And then another question was, what types of buildings have to be built to the energy code adopted by SECO? And what entities have authority to enforce compliance?
So that's one I wish, like heck, we had Randy on because I
I
have.
know.
However, I'm happy to make that connection with Randy. I'm sure he'd be able to talk your ear off about it. Um, I think, I mean, for sure, I would assume, and again, I hesitate to assume here, but I would assume universities, municipal buildings, things like that would definitely fall under that auspice. Um, again, I would have to, I'll defer to Randy for most of it, though, our codes program senior manager.
Yeah, and any update on the Texas Energy Fund?
Well, we do have a little bit of an update. The PUC approved two programs so far. So we are seeing some movement there. However, it's kind of low and slow at this point. So there had obviously, I think a lot of people were aware there were some snafus early on um, with some of the applications that were put in and what was being provided. So there had to be a little bit of a review of those programs again, a little deeper dive of those applications. But as of right now, we only have two programs that have been granted by the PUC. And I believe we have someone at our conference, shameless plug again, who's probably going to be able to speak to a little more of that, or at least a few people there, which will be on September 18th. So, and 19th.
I like the shameless plugs. Um, yeah, I put in the chat as well the link to your WhatsApp as and to your website, as well as to where this recording will be uploaded and the presentation will be as well. Are there any other questions? Let's see, I've asked most of.
And if you guys have any, priorities or things you wanted to discuss that you think should be brought up, please, happy to have an open discussion here.
Yeah, we can have an open discussion. I can, if you raise your hand, I can allow for you to talk. So if you're interested in that. There's another message here. I just did a quick search regarding 388. Um, and it was Senate Bill 241. So let's look again. Oh, so the question is back to you from Melissa Baker. So after 2025, no more reports. That's not the case. What it's saying is that um, so after that date, they were trying to extend the timeline for the believe it was having the 5% reduction. That timeline was being extended, and that's what they're looking at. So I'm doing a quick search for you, Melissa, and I'll see what I can find because I
Yeah,
didn't see it actually in our priorities, which I thought was
well,
interesting.
it is
Um,
didn't pass, if I remember
it
correctly.
didn't pass. Oh, okay. There's an anonymous attendee that's going to put you to task. I'm so glad they're asking these questions because no, I was going to ask you some hard ones. What exactly do we see going on the front of nuclear? Is the tech space is pushing heavily for it?
That is a great question. A little bit out of our purview as an organization, but from what we have noticed, I mean, there's definitely a big push from industry and from our elected leaders on that. As far as the tax base is concerned, I don't have enough information to provide an excellent answer on. I'm happy to do a little bit of research and connect you with some folks that I know. Um, just feel free to shoot me an email. I think my email is somewhere, or Sean. Um,
Yeah, we can advance the slide to your address. And then, we have another question in the chat, if there's a cohort or opportunities for creating energy plans. I'm so glad you asked. So the State Energy Conservation Office, I really want to see those kind of plans for local governments. And so I worked for Travis County previously for a decade and put together our energy plans and reports. So I will be happy. We have funding actually set aside for SPEER to provide assistance for energy plans and helping with your data submission. So please reach out and I'll put my email in the chat as well. We also have a cohort that we put together for asking questions about what's going on, and that's really from with the Community Efficiency Leadership Coalition. And I can put that in the chat, and so you just put in an application. It's free, and that's a great way to become part of the cohort and answer a lot of your questions. We meet monthly with a casual coffee chat. Occasionally, we get Noah to join us and have some good conversations. So yeah, I'll put that information in there as well. I had a couple of questions for you because I know also that some of you are receiving CEUs for joining us, and so it's a conversation that's happened quite often. So I want to hear what's the conversation is the legislature regarding the data centers and what are their concerns, and is there conversations about policy and yeah, hear a little bit more about that.
so great question, big question.
This is a big question.
Certainly a lot of conversations. I can kind of roll back a little bit to the interim period last session, or before this previous session, I should say. Uh, there was some concern, and also I think into February, Pablo Vegas from the CEO of ERCOT came and spoke to the State Affairs Committee and Senate, Texas State Senate, and let them know that the forecast that they're seeing, primarily driven by data center growth here in Texas, as well as some other factors as well, um, is potentially going to increase our peak load by almost double. I mean, we go from, I think our peak load is 88 or 86 gigawatts right now, and it's potentially going to be up to 150 at times. I mean, it's really the forecast and trying to find the right mixture. We're not entirely sure what it's going to be, but there is definitely concern that because of that growth, it's going to be something that needs to be seriously, policy regulations are going to be put in place. Now, the question is, what does that look like, right? And so we are seeing discussions from the legislature on potentially bring your own generation discussion. So if you're coming here as a data center, maybe you bring your own solar, wind, or thermal plant, or geothermal plant type aspect. And we're seeing things like that to try and help reduce the burden. Or we're also seeing bring your own transmission as well. So these types of aspects, while haven't become law to my understanding at this point, there are conversations that are being had. The reality is, I think everyone wants these centers to some degree, right? It's good for your economy, it's good for what's going on, but there's obviously a lot of challenges that are going into that. So trying to figure out where that works and how it's going to be most beneficial for everyone, as well as not overburdening our existing grid and potentially causing blackouts or brownouts, is all incredibly important at this point. Um, at this point, I would highly anticipate interim charges around data center growth again. That was something that was brought up during the last interim. I, again, fully anticipate that this session as well.
Thanks for answering that. Uh, so the big 2027 session, will it be heavily watched? What do you anticipate on the energy efficiency front for that session?
You know, I hate to sound like Charlie Brown and, going for the football, because I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I'm hopeful that we will actually get something passed to help uh, reform the energy efficiency rules that we currently have. My guess is obviously we're watching what the PUC does, and there's a hope that as they're reviewing these rules and they come up with things, there's opportunity to either codify or improve upon what the PUC rulemaking looks like. Assuming that they are able to get through that in the next calendar year, heading into the 2027 session, for the 90th session, I should say. Um, I'm hopeful. I mean, there's definitely been some buy-in on some of those aspects that we've talked about. The sticking point for energy efficiency continues to be the goal discussion. But on a lot of those administrative changes that we've talked about, so the cost effectiveness at the portfolio level, doing 3-year cycle, multi-year planning cycles, um, increasing ways to get low income and hard to reach folks, additional funding, some of those things like that they're not the biggest, they're not the sexiest changes, but they're things that can helpfully provide flexibility to the utilities and also put more money back into efficiency. I think there's room for that. Now, the question is going to be how that actually takes shape and if we're actually going to be able to do that with or without a goal discussion as well. I think the goal discussion is going to have to come along just because of the various stakeholders involved. That is priority number one for a lot of folks. Um, but I think the other question is looking at how do we look forward, not just for the next 5 years, but the next 50 years? How can we potentially make some big changes while also making incremental changes now so we're setting ourselves up for the future, if that makes sense? Um, SPEER and other folks are definitely interested in opportunities, and we want to work with the utilities, we want to work with advocates, we want to work with everyone to try and identify those consensus items now, and hopefully work together to really develop a program that or programs that help everyone reduce customer costs, save energy, and keep the lights on for everyone. It just really is going to be difficult to see where we're going to go. But I think ultimately I'm hopeful that there will be legislation moved. I mean, this is now the second session in a row that we've had an energy efficiency bill move out of one chamber, and this time it moved out of one chamber and one committee hearing, or one committee. So hopefully we can kind of keep inching a little bit further to get something accomplished.
Thanks, Noah. There is another question here. You had mentioned a new energy efficiency division was created and is working on rulemaking. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what their purview is?
Yeah, so they were created under within the PUC, the Public Utility Commission. Their director, Ramya Ramaswamy, and she has, I think, two staff with her as well. And their purview is literally to review and regulate uh, the excuse me, the energy efficiency programs. They work with the EMV, or Evaluations, Measurement, and Verification contractor, to make sure that the utilities are providing their reporting on time, that they're continuing to meet and exceed their goals. They have actually also undertaken, as a division, just recently, a little bit of a special rate case for the performance bonus process. Um, that they were concerned about some abnormally high avoided costs, which led to abnormally high performance bonuses. And so they wanted to see if there was room potentially through a rate case to bring that down some, or to kind of cap it at a secondary cap. Um, the commission at large decided that wasn't the appropriate place to be having that discussion, and they preferred to go through a rulemaking. So I think that's why we're seeing, again, this is speculation on my part, but I think that's why we're seeing the performance bonus discussion first in this rulemaking. But that's kind of their purview, is to really look at the energy efficiency programs and look at where they can improve, where they can and can't. We know that based on the actions that were taken in 2010 by the PUC, that they have authority to change those goals, and change those programs. It's just a matter of what falls under the actual language of the statute and kind of where there's wiggle room. Um, so they're a really important aspect of this, and honestly, it's a long time coming, and they've done a great job. Really happy to work with them as a group. They're very responsive. When you have questions, they're always happy to reach out. They also have multiple every year. They have two kind of stakeholder meetings called the Energy Efficiency Implementation Project meetings. They have one on October 7th coming up. So mark your calendars. That could be in person, or you can watch virtually from your phone or computer. Um, so definitely something to keep an eye on. I hope that kind of answered some of the question. It's
It did. It did. Okay. Well, we haven't had any other questions come in. I will say, Noah, you're a fantastic resource for SPEER, and I really appreciate all the effort and time that you put in to watching over 300 legislative bodies go through. So I wanted to let everyone know there in the chat, I've also added information. We have a policy newsletter that goes out every month that has a great amount of information. So if you're interested in receiving newsletters specifically on policy, please sign up. I put the link there. We also have one on energy codes. So some of the energy code questions, you could reach out directly to Randy, our codes manager, and as well as we have our government focused newsletter that I manage and put out. I also put in the chat our workshop that's coming up in September. Noah's put together a great panel, and I have as well. And so, I want to put a shameless plug out there for looking outside the building envelope for the panel that I put together. We have several innovators who have even been on some TED Talks, and they're talking about passive housing design, as well as what can you do outside the building envelope to decrease your energy consumption inside. So I'm excited about that. Uh, and then for those questions regarding energy reporting, I've put in a link directly to several resources regarding energy reporting for local governments. There's several resources there, such as a spreadsheet that you can use, as well as some fact sheets and some reporting guides. And the application if you're interested in being part of the local government cohort, if you're a local government. Well, Noah, is there anything that you would like to add? I have one final question, though.
I
So
appreciate it. I know there's a lot, and I apologize if there's a lot of bills, so numbers kind of escape me, but absolutely, I'm happy to have a conversation outside of this directly. Please feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to dig in as much as I can. And again, I think to start with, we are a 501(c)(3), so lobbying is always kind of a challenge for us. So we can be more educational, but again, I think we've had a really great opportunity over the last couple sessions to kind of make a mark and get some good information up at the Capitol, and hopefully we can keep that going.
I agree. So we are known for being a great resource, and we have Republicans and Democrats come to SPEER for requests for information. Um, so with that, I wanted to end with a couple of minutes of just giving it to you. Noah, I am always curious on how people get here. So I would love to learn a little bit about your passion for following energy efficiency policy and how you got here. Do you mind sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had actually worked for
Thanks.
the Texas Department of Transportation and obviously transportation policy for several years. And right about that time was when the previous administration, the Biden administration, had been really ramping up their efforts to pass the IIJA and the bipartisan infrastructure law. And so there's really that connection between transportation and energy. And I felt that was a really great opportunity to make that jump because I've always been interested in energy policy, and obviously going through Winter Storm Uri and going through some other energy crises down here in Texas. It's a little bit different than where I'm from in Ohio, where we don't have nearly as, I mean, I won't say nearly as bad, but definitely we have maybe not as frequent extreme weather. Um, and so I think that's kind of where I was really interested. And I think another thing that really kind of gets to me is helping both low income, hard to reach folks, as well as just kind of everyday, people trying to make sure that they keep the lights on at an affordable price. And I thought there was a really great opportunity there, and that's where energy efficiency comes in, right? It really is the most low cost and an effective way, for that matter, to reduce your energy burden. I think now there's other opportunities. I mean, my mother, I love her to death, but she's always saying that she wants to put solar panels on her house and she wants to do this and that, and I said, well, maybe we should talk about weatherization. Maybe we should talk about updating some of your appliances. Let's talk about some of these lower cost, but still as impactful changes that you can make that really help reduce your energy cost. And I think that's where I think energy efficiency really, really can be a game changer. It's not going to be the answer for Texas at large. It's not going to fix the grid and our load management issues that we have forecasted over the next 5 to 6 years, but it can be a bridge. It can provide us a little bit of time at a low cost and try and help make a difference while we have those longer discussions on resource mixture and how we're going to get more natural gas or how we're going to get more renewables or how we're going to get more nuclear. All of these different aspects need time to be figured out. And obviously, we've got a lot of issues on the supply chain as well. So a lot of things going on.
We do. There's a lot going on right now. Thank you for sharing. And thank you all for attending today. And we hope to see you at our next webinar. And I will throw in the chat the link to our calendar for our next webinar. if you want to see in the series. And we will see you all next time.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.